Good evening. How's everybody doing? How's the dinner? Chef Candace has done a great job of, getting everybody together here. I'm Matt Briney. I'm the Chief Communications Officer for the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. It's my honor to invite you to welcome you to the Badlands. How was your evening on the breezeway and overlooking Theodore Roosevelt National Park? It's the only national park named for an individual, and we think very appropriately named. That's why the library is here. That's the North Dakota that you were promised. The Buttes, the Little Missouri, cutting slowly through the bottom of it all. Medora, just down the hill, a town of 130 people normally. You came a long way to get here, and that's the point. This is an old place that keeps longer clock than the rest of us do. And what you took millions of years to carve, and long before it called the Badlands or Dakota or North Dakota, this was the home and homeland of the Mandan, the Hidatsa, and the Arikara, the peoples that known today as the MHA Nation and the three affiliated tribes. Their story on this land runs deeper than the one you're about to hear, but they have there's a trail that threads through this country. In fact, it runs right through the library's property called the Mahade. The name comes from the Mandan language, and it means roughly an area that has been or will be around for a very long time. And I want you all to remember that, because we're going to come back to that. Now, in September of 1883, a young man stepped off the train, not too far down from here. In fact, you were looking out on the breezeway. If you look right down there, that's where he got off that train. It was the middle of the night. He was 24 years old. He was from New York City, and he had come this way to shoot a bison before there was none left to shoot. He was very nearly too late. A decade earlier, the herds of these plains ran into the millions. Hunters shipped hides back by trail car. The time this young man arrived, the great northern herd was gone, killed off by 3 years' time. So he rode, days in cold rain, through gumbo mud that swallowed a horse to the knees. And what he found out there was mostly evidence: skulls, bleached bones, old wallows with grass growing over them. He kept going and finally found his bison. And when he dropped it, he was so pleased that he danced around the carcass. But the thing that mattered most on that trip wasn't the bison. Before he got back on the eastbound train, he sat down with two men he knew roughly for about a week, Sylvain Ferris and Bill Merrifield. And he handed them $14,000 to buy him cattle. So no lawyers, no contract to speak of, just a handshake and a scrap of paper. And that was the Maltese Cross Ranch. The greenhorn with spectacles that had just bet a small fortune on a stretch of badlands he had known for 2 weeks. And he went home to New York to his young wife and the legislative life that he had built. But 5 months later, his whole world would come crashing apart in a single day. On the 14th of February, 1884, in the same house, in the same morning, he lost his mother and his wife within 2 hours of each other. His mother of typhoid, his wife of a kidney disease no one had caught in time. She was 22, and she had just given birth to their first child, Alice. That night, he opened his diary. He drew a single large X in it on the page, and beneath it he wrote, "The light has gone out in my life." You'll see that diary tomorrow when you tour the exhibits. He could not stay in New York, where every street and every face reminded him of what he had lost. So he came out here instead, to a hard country. He came to cattle and cold and distant, to work so demanding that it might crowd the grief out of his head. And that young man, of course, is Theodore Roosevelt, and the reason why we're all here. The Badlands didn't fix him quickly. Grief doesn't work that way. And this country doesn't hand out easy comfort, as you will all learn over the next couple days. What it does is ask something of you every single day. And so it asked. It put him into the saddle from dawn to dark on the roundup, and it buried his cattle in blizzards. It sent him after boat thieves down a frozen river. It handed him a lantern and long winter nights, and with them he filled about writing about the very land around him. He would later describe riding through here under a full moon. The Badlands seemed to be stranger and wilder than ever, with silvery rays turning the country into a kind of grim fairyland. Slowly, the work did what work does. The man who rode out of this country a couple years later was harder, steadier, and somehow more himself than the one who had arrived. He went back east, he went back to public life, and he kept climbing all the way to the presidency of the United States. He counted these Dakota years amongst the most important of his life, and he never really forgot them. And here's what he did with them. As president from 1901 to 1909, Theodore Roosevelt protected more of America than any president before him or since. The numbers are almost hard to imagine. Roughly 250 million acres, or 230 million acres of public land, an area larger than Texas and North Dakota combined, 150 national forests, 5 national parks, 18 national monuments, the first being Devil's Tower and the grandest being the Grand Canyon, which he fought to keep unspoiled, 51 federal bird reservations, and one of the very first ones being here in North Dakota at Stump Lake, and he built the U.S. Forest Service to look after all of it. But the numbers aren't the reason why we still talk about him. The reason is how he thought about it. And this is the part that, if you remember anything from this weekend, I hope you take this away about Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt was not against business, and he was not for locking the land away behind glass, never to be touched. He was a rancher. He was a hunter. He used this land with his own 2 hands, and he believed people should use what the country gives them: its timber, its water, its soil, its game. In a 1907 speech at Jamestown, Virginia, he put it plainly: the conservation of our natural resources and their proper use constitute the fundamental problem which underlies almost every other problem of our national life. Listen to those words together: proper use. Not lock it up, not tear it down, use it well. What Roosevelt could not stand was waste. Using a thing up carelessly, taking everything now so that nothing was left for the people coming after. That to him wasn't prosperity, that was theft. From a generation that couldn't yet speak for itself. And when he looked at the great places of this country, Yosemite, the Sequoias, the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, the Tetons, he wrote that our people should see it, that they are preserved for the children and their children's children forever, with a majestic beauty all unmarred. Their children and their children's children forever. There's a whole idea in one sentence: don't touch it, don't use it up, pass it on. Which, if you think about it, the Mandan were saying all along. The Maade, an area that will be around for a long time. They had a phrase for it centuries before Theodore Roosevelt did. Which is why you're here. You didn't fly and drive into town of 130 people for a convenient location. The American Conservation Coalition brought its most committed leaders to one landscape that made Theodore Roosevelt who he became. And that's not an accident. The questions you're wrestling with this weekend: how this country stays prosperous and productive and still hands itself the whole to the next generation, are not new questions. They are the exact questions that Roosevelt wrestled with on this ground more than a century ago. And notice, those questions don't belong to one party or one side. Stewardship, responsibility, the plain idea that you leave a place better than you found it, and that you inherit, you owe forward. Those belong to every American. They always have been. The answers, though, the answers for your generation aren't yet written. They are yours to write. And there could be no better place in this country to start writing them than right here. And so some genuine thanks to the American Conservation Coalition, and thank you for choosing this place to trust your Top 50 Summit here for the very first year. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Stephen, and the entire ACC team who have built this weekend from the ground up. And thank you for bringing 50 of your brightest and greatest young conservationists that have the future of our country. It's no logistical feat to get people to Medora, and we really appreciate that you have done this, and it matters. This building opened its doors on the 4th of July, America's 250th birthday, just a few weeks ago. You were among the very first that we get to welcome, and there could be no more fitting than a room full of young conservationist leaders gathered in Theodore Roosevelt's Badlands. But one last thing that I want to leave you with. In 1899, before all the forests, all the monuments, Roosevelt gave a speech in Chicago called The Strenuous Life. The one line of that has become what this library is really about. He said, "Far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even through checkered by failure, than to take rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they live in the gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat." So that's why you're here, to not sit in the gray twilight, to dare mighty things, and to pass it on, unmarred, to the children and the children's children who come after you. So it's my honor to welcome you to the Badlands, to welcome you to Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library, and have a wonderful weekend. Let's get to work.